Oh, wow, that happened fast. Thank you for joining us for this special edition of KPBS News. I'm Maya Trabulsi. With the coronavirus comes milestones. Milestones we'd rather not have, but we do. In San Diego County, we have surpassed 1 million tests. Nationwide, sadly, we passed the grim milestone of going over 200,000 deaths. Flags were put up near the Washington Monument to recognize the lives lost. According to Johns Hopkins, it's by far the highest confirmed death toll of any country. The real number is thought to be higher, in part because coronavirus deaths were widespread before testing, and they may have been attributed to other causes.
This was preventable. Not all of it, but much of it. And what could be lost in the future is preventable too, if we embrace science. Science instead of politics.
The U.S. has less than 5% of the world's population, but more than 20% of the reported COVID-19 deaths. To date, more than 6.8 million cases of coronavirus have been confirmed in the U.S. And as we surpass the 1 millionth test locally, the big debate was what to do if we moved from the red tier to the more restrictive purple. And although that did not happen, the impact the virus is having on the county remains devastating. More now from KPBS health reporter Taryn Mento.
COVID is number 6 on this year's top causes of death in San Diego County.
It's just now edging out chronic lower respiratory disease.
The county's Dr. Eric McDonald says that trend will likely continue.
That's really quite concerning. It's actually rapidly rising on accidents, and I would not be surprised if it comes into the top 4 by the end of the year.
The grim news comes just as San Diego County narrowly avoided restrictions on businesses because COVID spread was on the higher end. The county's case rate just met the state's second most restrictive level of red. The measurement was just below the threshold that could have put us in the purple level, which is the most restrictive. That brought relief to businesses, but Supervisor Greg Cox warned it'll only last as long as the public takes precautions.
The reality is we remain at risk of being moved to that more restrictive tier in the future if we don't continue to do those things that we know that we need to do.
Those actions are hand washing, wearing face coverings, avoiding gatherings, and staying 6 feet away. Still, County Public Health Officer Dr. Wilma Wooten says she's pushing the state on how it determines any new closures.
There are 3 things that we feel, and not just myself as the health officer for San Diego County, but other health officers across the state, utilizing if counties are maintaining that hospitalization and hospital capacity to somehow get credit for that, and also to get credit for contact tracing.
Wooten is scheduled to give the Board of Supervisors an update next week. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
All across the county, parents have been rallying, calling for their districts to come up with a school plan that identifies when they will reopen for in-class learning. We saw demonstrations in front of the San Diego Unified Board meeting, also in Carlsbad at the San Diego District meeting. Parents had similar messages calling for a timeline, saying online learning is hampering their child's education. One parent organizer who is a family therapist is also concerned with the mental health of children.
The isolation, the lack of social interaction, is a huge part that many children as young as 5 years old are experiencing depressive symptoms.
The Reopen SDUSD group has a petition drive underway. As for the district, new numbers just released show school enrollment is down. More on that from KPBS education reporter Joe Hong.
San Diego Unified has about 2,500 fewer students than it expected this year. About 2/3 of that deficit came from kindergarten. District leaders are still trying to understand specifically how the pandemic led to the shortage of students.
I would suspect that there are a number of reasons.
Richard Barrera is a school board member at San Diego Unified.
It's not mandatory, for students to attend kindergarten. So we might have some families who are making a choice not to enroll. We might have other families that aren't clear about how to enroll.
Teachers say this drop in enrollment raises major long-term concerns.
Kindergarten is the starting place for their school education.
Molly Stewart is a teacher at Ocean Beach Elementary. She said some of her families have opted for homeschooling instead of online learning through the district.
They're concerned about the amount of screen time for their students, for their children. And so they're finding alternatives. And then they let us know that as soon as we return to in-person, because they live in our neighborhood, that they'll be returning.
Stewart said teachers try everything they can to keep their students, including providing more supports and flexibility. Barrera said the district is still making an effort to enroll more kindergarten students.
We'll get the student a laptop. The students will have access to our free and reduced lunch program. There are so many reasons why we just think students are better off by going ahead and enrolling in kindergarten.
Other districts have also seen dips in enrollment. Chula Vista Elementary is down by close to 600 students. Joe Hong, KPBS News.
UC San Diego's effort to track COVID-19 in sewage has already identified 2 people who were carrying the virus. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson has details.
The San Diego University began testing sewage pipes for traces of the COVID virus earlier this year. Robert Schooley is a distinguished professor of medicine at UCSD. He says researchers detected the virus in a sewage pipe connected to dorms and labs a couple of weeks ago.
UCSD was able to get in touch with about 700 people in the next day and a half. They were all tested. And we found 2 people who were without symptoms who were shedding viral RNA from their noses. So we found 2 infected people from this signature in the water pipe that we wouldn't have known about if we hadn't been doing the water pipe testing.
Researchers look for RNA and DNA fragments of the virus in the wastewater. He says if they find it, they move quickly to test people who spent time in the buildings. Schooley says this testing will continue as the university welcomes more students back to campus. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
If you've lost income or faced increased medical expenses because of COVID-19, you could qualify for help paying past due or upcoming rent. The San Diego County Board of Supervisors has set aside $24 million for an emergency rental assistance program. Renters can apply for one-time assistance of up to $3,000. Households must fall under 60% of area median income to qualify. Applications will be accepted now through October 8th, and you can find out more at sdhcd.org. The CDC continues to try and clear the air over whether or not the coronavirus can be spread by breathing in particles in the air. At one point this week, they said yes, but then abruptly reversed the new guidance. Now, if you look on its website, the CDC has removed language about airborne transmission. A spokesman says it was a draft version of proposed changes and will be reposted once the review process is completed. Several studies have shown coronavirus can spread through small particles in the air. There are still so many differing opinions about COVID-19, and that was evident during a Senate hearing where Senator Rand Paul and Dr. Anthony Fauci went head to head. The Kentucky senator claimed that New York City had the virus under control because of herd immunity and not restrictions. But Fauci was quick to correct him.
They're no longer having the pandemic because they have enough immunity in New York City to actually stop.
I challenge that. Senator, because I want to, please, sir, I would like to be able to do this because this happens with Senator Rand all the time. You were not listening to what the director of the CDC said, that in New York, it's about 22%. If you believe 22% is herd immunity, I believe you're alone in that.
The most optimistic view of herd immunity is that 60% of the public would have to have the COVID antibodies in order for the disease to stop its spread without any type of restrictions. A fifth U.S.-backed COVID vaccine candidate reached final testing this week, but it's unclear when or which one would be approved. Still, the CDC is asking health officials to make distribution plans now. Dr. William Schaffner, medical director of the National Foundation for Infectious Diseases, says this means health officials have to plan for all scenarios.
If some of these vaccines, and one of them does, require a deep freeze, where would we locate that deep freeze? Who are the people who will then be trained in how to actually handle these vaccines?
San Diego County public health officials say they are working on a plan, but they won't share details until it is further along. The Latino community has been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. KPBS reporter Tanya Thorne spoke to a family that lost a loved one and now faces the future with economic uncertainty.
Angelico Maldonado died on August 22nd from damages left behind by COVID-19. He spent 6 weeks on a ventilator before having to be disconnected. He was undocumented and uninsured when the pandemic hit. He was also the main breadwinner for his family, now leaving them in financial distress.
My father was 68 years old. Retirement was not an option, at least not for him. He lived with my mom majorly, so of course he was the bigger income there.
Originally from Oaxaca, Mexico, Maldonado came to the U.S. 35 years ago and spent over 25 years in the roofing industry in San Diego. Before being hospitalized, Maldonado feared the cost of medical care and being deported if seeking help, a fear that lives in many Latinos today.
My dad didn't have insurance, so of course he couldn't call his doctor and say, hey, what do? I have fever. I've been having fever for so long, and that wasn't an option that he had.
Neither was working from home. Maldonado continued going to work during the COVID restrictions as roofing jobs got busier. For many Latinos, working from home is a luxury that they don't have or simply can't afford. These are the types of cases the Chicano Federation often sees when helping families navigate the burdens of the pandemic.
And we see that every day. We talk to folks who are these essential workers who say, I'm sorry, but I have no choice. You know, if I don't work today, I might not be able to pay rent tomorrow.
Alcantar says other factors driving the COVID cases up in the Latino community are the underlying health conditions and lack of access to health care. Latinos also frequent public transportation more and live in multi-generational households. As a roofer, Maldonado frequently interacted with many different people. He was diabetic, had no access to health care, and lived with his wife, children, and grandchildren. All of these elements made him more susceptible to catching COVID-19.
There's been absolutely no help for our undocumented families in our community who contribute greatly to our local economy, contribute greatly to our society as a whole, and yet they've been excluded from this help.
In July, when Maldonado, his wife, and several family members were diagnosed with COVID-19, they were left to pay out of pocket to see a doctor and get tested due to having no insurance. That is when the financial stress began for the Maldonado family. After diagnosis, everyone with COVID was forced to go into quarantine.
Again, when we got COVID, we were out of work for a whole month. This was definitely not something we were planning to go through.
Maldonado's wife, Maria de Los Angeles, is a legal U.S. resident working on Camp Pendleton. She and her husband plan to return to Oaxaca in January to retire. Plans that have now changed, forcing Angeles to depend on her children for financial support.
Después de tanto tiempo de estar trabajando aquí.
She said, it's a shame. After all these years of working here, we have nothing built here.
Nada.
While Maldonado was approved for emergency Medi-Cal, the family still hasn't seen a final hospital bill.
Nosotros como familias latinas.
She said, Latino families like us live day by day just to pay rent, pay bills. We don't have enough left over to save money. Now for me, it's going to be more difficult because my partner is gone. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
This story was produced with support from the journalism nonprofit Economic Hardship Reporting Project. Overall, the South Bay has been especially hit hard by the pandemic, and health officials are now worried about the potential for a serious flu outbreak. As KPBS reporter Jacob Ayers shows us, efforts are underway to fight back.
National City's fire department has teamed up with the nursing program at Point Loma Nazarene University, offering free flu shots on Tuesdays from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m.
Everybody is welcome. Our intended population is National City residents who are uninsured or underinsured, but again, everybody's welcome throughout the county.
This is the second year of this partnership. Monique Sawyer is an associate professor at the university and says that she is worried about the overlap between the COVID-19 pandemic and the upcoming flu season.
A huge concern obviously is COVID, so we want people to be at least protected from the flu since we don't have a COVID vaccine yet, so at least we can know that we're offering that protection so that if they do develop symptoms that could be looking either like COVID or the flu, we can have some certainty that if they've gotten the flu vaccine, that most likely they have protection against that.
That's it, we're done.
The shots are given by paramedics and nursing students. Robinson says the fire station program is the only one of its kind in the state.
This year is our first day and we're already way busier than we were last year. So we're really excited about kind of the more that the word gets out, people will be here.
I think that's good for everybody, especially the Spanish community. A lot of times we don't know, but we got to take advantage over here.
Made it. I'll give you a little Band-Aid.
The program is expected to run through December or until supplies run out. Jacob Ayers, KPBS News.
In downtown San Diego, a luxury high-rise apartment building has become known as the place to party since stay-at-home orders were relaxed. iNewsSource reporter Sofia Mejias Pasco has more.
Since May, calls to San Diego police about parties and other disturbances at Pinnacle in the Park have increased sixfold. That's compared to the same time last year. Dozens of units are rented out on Airbnb and other sites. That's not illegal, but the debauchery that follows is causing problems. Robin Spencer lives in the complex with her 12-year-old son.
They shoot off fireworks from their balcony. They spit from the balcony. They throw glasses off the balcony. They have sex on the balconies and drop their condoms off the side. And they land on people's windowsills. San Diego police say there are active criminal investigations in the high-rise. Pinnacle in the Park did not respond to requests for comment. For KPBS, I'm iNewsSource reporter Sofia Mejias Pasco.
And iNewsSource is an independently funded nonprofit partner of KPBS. UC San Diego is moving forward with contact tracing for the coronavirus on campus, and they'll use technology to do it. Those on campus can now download an app on their iPhone that will let them know if they've come in contact with someone who later tests positive for COVID-19. University officials hope the cell phone technology will help them avoid the type of coronavirus chaos that has left more than 933 infected at San Diego State University. With the pandemic now entering its 6th month, both parents and teachers of students with disabilities have struggled to keep their students on track. KPBS education reporter Jo Hong spent the day with a special education teacher who has 2 sons of her own on the autism spectrum.
Always on time and ready to learn.
Leticia Avalar starts her day at 6:30 in the morning.
I still haven't heard from you, Isaac.
She wakes up an hour before her 2 sons so she can lesson plan, catch up on emails, or clean her house.
Okay, here. Here's your jelly. We can take your sandwiches outside.
When her sons wake up, she prepares breakfast and logs into her virtual classroom.
Okay, Jonah, I'm gonna go on classes, guys. Let's have a quiet voice.
The 30-year-old single mom hadn't always planned on a career in special education. She was originally studying English and art, but her outlook changed after her first son, Jonah, was diagnosed with autism and epilepsy. Her early experiences with trying to get him the services he needed led her to take a job in 2016 as a special education teacher's aide in the San Diego Unified School District.
Once he was diagnosed, you kind of just get an initial diagnosis and they're like, okay, bye. And for me, I knew there had to be more than that.
Luckily, she had some help.
His first special education teacher guided me through the whole process on how to get services, how to navigate special education, and she would call me and tell me, this is what you have to do, this is the best thing for your son. And I wanted to be that person for somebody because I knew how important it was, just to have somebody on your corners.
She decided to get her special education teaching credential, which she completed earlier this year. Then, fate dealt her another twist when she had to start her teaching career in the middle of a pandemic. So now she is raising 11-year-old Jonah and 7-year-old Des, who's also on the autism spectrum. And she's logging on every day to teach a class of high schoolers in special ed.
The beginning, it was very hard, especially everything being shut down. So we were literally stuck in there in a 1-bedroom apartment for probably 2 months. And that was very difficult for all of us.
However, she says the first few weeks of teaching in the new term have been smooth, but life's still a challenge. While she teaches, her sons still need her attention as they attend their own Zoom classes.
It's kind of transitioning back into, I'm working again, I don't have the time. It's what's making this difficult again.
Leticia said Jonah hasn't fallen behind academically, but Des is having a harder time with reading and adjusting to the new schedule.
And he's just having a hard time getting back into the school routine of being online and seeing his teachers, and it's still very hard for him. He's having difficulties.
Both Jonah and Des are getting speech therapy services, and Leticia says they're getting better at distance learning. When their classes are over, she spends the rest of the day preparing lessons or helping her sons with their schoolwork. She's also studying to get her master's degree in special education.
There's not enough knees, so I feel like I'm not doing enough on their end, and then sometimes I feel like I'm not doing enough on the teaching end. I always in the day, what more could I have done? But then I think, what more can I possibly do?
But she's comforted by the knowledge that the insight she's gained from her son's experiences has made her both a better teacher and a better parent. Jo Hong, KPBS News.
Saying thank you. That was the message behind an event this week in Balboa Park. The Spirit of Liberty Foundation and the San Diego Air and Space Museum kicked off Operation Thank You Relay in the Sky. The event is a tribute to healthcare professionals and first responders at a time when we need them the most.
It's more than a thank you. It's lifting their spirits. They all believe people care. But the fact is, sometimes you need to hear it loudly.
And the relay itself begins at San Diego International, will take part in 98 cities in 50 states, then ending in Washington, D.C. on October 30th. An urban farm in City Heights is becoming an anchor for the community amid the pandemic, letting people pay what they can for fresh food. Our Speak City Heights Arts Center of San Diego gives us a look at La Vuelta Farm.
La Vuelta Farm is a partnership, and it's myself and my neighbor and old friend Rika, and we grow microgreens and shoots here in City Heights with the goal of making fresh food more accessible and affordable in our area. One of the reasons why we focused on City Heights is because in our farm, as La Vuelta Farm, we always envision this as being a business that's a kind of force against gentrification. And so we want to grow these delicious, beautiful greens, but not just go and sell them in La Jolla. There's a lot of immigrants here in this neighborhood and everywhere, Mexican immigrants, Latino immigrants, but also from all over the world that have these ways of eating and existing and living that's more in connection to the land and the seasons. But when they immigrate, there's this idea that you have to, assimilate or adapt to the way of life here. There's this quick loss that happens from our traditions. And so people think that's just not possible to have that fresh, the fresh greens that you used to harvest, the chiles, whatever. Some of our neighbors come by and they see what we're growing in the front yard. They're like, what? You have chile de bean? This is amazing. I didn't think you can even grow these. I thought they had to be wild harvested. And so there's a reawakening, I think, that happens when people start seeing small urban farms that are growing these traditional foods. And there's also just that it feels like, oh, wow, this is worth doing. And it can be done. It's been really cool to see our customer base growing here in City Heights at the Fairmount Urban Garden pop-up on Saturdays, because we do have a lot of Latino women and families and kids that are excited to be picking up their pepinos, and it's pretty cool because some of them share their photos with us of the kids super excited eating what was in the box this week. The strawberries, the watermelon. It's been really fulfilling for me to find myself in this role of being able to share healthy food and the recipes and the access with other people in my family, first and foremost, and in my neighborhood. Having the core of our business be committed to equity was there from the start. And then with COVID, we see that there's so many people that are unemployed right now or struggling, and having the superpower to grow fresh food and be able to share it with our communities is something that we're really excited to share. So Pay What You Can is just feel like that's the only just way to be functioning right now in these times, because it's not all about profits. It's about sustainability and how do we keep not just ourselves in a safe place that feels stable, but our communities.
After many San Diego County farmers were initially left out of federal COVID-19 relief programs, that is now changing. iNewsSource reporter Camille Van Canel explains.
Flowers and nursery plants are the region's most valuable crops. But when the government offered aid earlier this year to farmers for coronavirus-related losses, these kinds of crops weren't covered. Now they are. Starting this week, growers of flowers and specialty fruit can apply to get some of the $14 billion now available in new federal funding. Michael Milano heads a flower company with fields near Camp Pendleton that saw sales plummet this year. He and other growers lobbied federal officials and Congress to be eligible for the relief.
Our representatives really went to bat for us, really made sure that we got a fair shake and are heard, and that's all we can ask for.
He says the federal aid will help, and he's applying for it. For KPBS, I'm iNewsSource reporter Camille Van Canel.
iNewsSource is an independently funded nonprofit partner of KPBS. And with the pandemic comes a new way to watch the Padres in the playoffs. The team is hosting a drive-in event in a parking lot outside Petco Park. The Padres postseason watch party will take place during next week's wild card round. The games will be shown on 3 large video screens to fans in their cars. Tickets are now available. And that's all for this special edition of KPBS News. For all of us here at KPBS, I'm Maya Trabulsi. Thank you for joining us. Stay safe.